Hello and welcome. I'm Bob Cusack, Editor-in-Chief of The Hill. Thank you for joining us for our Cybersecurity Summit. October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and in today's program, we'll explore the state of our nation's critical infrastructure, cyber defenses, data privacy, and consumer and business safety. But before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Looking Glass Cyber Solutions, for supporting today's event. Over the next 90 minutes, we'll discuss how we can defend our infrastructure from present and future threats. We will ask how Congress, the administration, and the private sector can work together to bolster our cyber defenses while protecting consumer privacy. We have an exciting lineup of speakers, and joining me to lead these conversations is Maggie Miller, the Hill cybersecurity reporter. Welcome, Maggie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we begin, though, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at the Hill events using the hashtag the Hill Cybersecurity. We are broadcasting live, and we will be taking your questions throughout the program. As with any live stream, you could experience occasional trouble with the video. Refreshing the page should, in most cases, fix the problem. Joining us to kick off the program is Congresswoman Yvette Clarke from New York, chair of the Homeland Cybersecurity Infrastructure Protection and Innovation Subcommittee. Maggie had a chance to speak with her a short while ago.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And during such a busy month of the year, the busiest month of the year in cybersecurity. And I wanted to kick off our conversation today by kind of asking a top-down question about where we are after what can only be described as an incredibly tumultuous year in cybersecurity, a difficult year, to say the least. You know, if you had to pick out, a threat that we've seen over the last year that still continues to be an issue for this country, what's the biggest threat that you think, we as a nation face? And, how are we positioned to approach that threat?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for having me, Maggie. It's a pleasure to be with you during this Cybersecurity Awareness and Education Month. And if there's something I think that is foremost in my mind and that of the American people, it's the level of ransomware attacks that we have witnessed. And, we hear about the big corporations that get hit sometimes way after the fact. But the fact of the matter is that there are ransomware attacks happening each and every day, not only in the private sector, but in our government sector, whether it's state and local governments. And, that is an indication of the fact that our adversaries are never sleeping, and that we've got to do everything we can to improve our cybersecurity posture. We've been able to avoid certainly sort of the worst possible outcomes, the things that keep us up at night. But at the end of the day, it's extremely costly. We are finding after the fact that many have succumbed to the ransom demands of bad actors, and it's very, very costly. So what are we doing? One of the things that we have done through the Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Infrastructure Protection and Innovation in the Department of Homeland Security Committee is to put forth legislation to assist our state, local, and tribal governments in really standing up a much more robust cybersecurity posture through a piece of legislation that is in our budget reconciliation bill that we hope will pass, because there's, I think, nothing more important for us right now than there are a lot of important things, but the specter of cyber threats that are constantly at our infrastructure as individuals, as entities, as the private sector, and as a government is almost insurmountable. So we've got to be far more outgoing in terms of the work that we do to educate, inform, and provide the tools that are needed to deter, to mitigate damages, and to learn from the ways in which our adversaries are behaving so that we can prevent as many intrusions as we possibly can.
And I wanted to ask you about the bill that you mentioned there, that I know you're spearheading, and specifically zoom in on one of the big areas of debate that there's been on Capitol Hill in recent weeks, which is around timeframes for mandatory cyber incident reporting to the federal government. I know that there's a bill in the Senate that calls for 24 hours. I know that there are bills that call for 72 hours. Can you speak to what you're hearing from industry in terms of these timeframes around incident reporting, and also why this timeframe is so vital specifically for CISA in terms of combating some of these threats?
Well, as you rightly stated, there's a divergence of thought about what is the best way to encourage the private sector in particular to do their reporting. And what your audience should know is that so much of our critical infrastructure is within the private sector, that it's important that we bring all stakeholders to the table to really get at the heart of what makes the most sense. And in our conversations with various stakeholders, we believe that given the types of attacks that we have seen on our critical infrastructure that we've experienced in the private sector, it's important that, one, they immediately address these intrusions, and that they're given enough time to sort of wrap their arms around it and then report to us what is taking place. And it's really about building trust. For the private sector, they're not used to a whole lot of government partnership, with the exception of sort of the regulatory regimes that they find themselves under. We recognize that in cyberspace, it is critical that we build that trust and that we create a space where people, entities feel safe in reporting to us what is taking place, so that CISA, when I say we, I mean CISA, has the ability to go in, to work with them, to get a sense of situational awareness, and also some forensic ability to get a sense of what it is our adversaries are really up to, where these intrusions are coming from. Not only are we talking about the fact that we are dealing with sometimes domestic, cyber threats, but they also can be international in nature. And I think, the public is well aware that our adversaries spend every waking moment, particularly coming out of Russia, China, North Korea, sometimes Iran, that we must be very diligent. And the only way that we enhance that diligence is by partnering with the private sector, where so many of these intrusions, can mean catastrophic occurrences in the lives of the American people.
Yeah, absolutely. And to piggyback off of that a little bit, there's a bill in the Senate Homeland Security Committee, which was just approved, that would also give a timeline for reporting if a company pays ransomware payments. What are your thoughts on, having legislation in place that would, beyond a time frame for mandatory reporting, also require companies to report if they pay up so that they can access their networks?
Yeah, I think that, our inclinations are to create a space where we're not paying ransoms. The more it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you feed into these bad actors, the more it becomes lucrative for them to continue their behavior. It is important that we know when a company has paid ransom. As you stated, we don't want to miss that window of opportunity. If that was the route they took, to be able to understand the magnitude of what occurred to them. And so it's critical that, we create a safe space, again, to report when a company has paid a ransom, in order to, receive their data back, access to their data, whatever the circumstances may call for, because oftentimes we think about what happens in an incident when we're dealing with information theft. We're now ratcheting up our our perspective to include critical infrastructure. I think that we came very close with the colonial pipeline, in terms of understanding how the information technological end of their company interfaces and interlaces with their industrial control systems. As a matter of fact, out of an abundance of caution, they shut down the pipeline, right? But we saw what the implications for that are in real time. And so, as you stated, they had already paid a ransom by the time this was widely reported, and sort of there was this fallout as a result of that. We want to try to get in there and encourage through partnerships the ability to sort of piggyback off of whether it's a third party entity that is helping the companies to navigate these cyber attacks and threats, so that we have a sense of what our adversaries are doing and what the implications are for the American people.
And some of these groups that have been hardest hit by ransomware attacks have been state and local governments, which I know is an area you are also passionate about funneling resources towards, such as through your State and Local Cybersecurity Improvement Act. Can you talk to what the status of this bill is in terms of moving forward, potential inclusion in packages moving forward, and also, what you think more, even beyond the bill, can be done to help these, very vulnerable and underfunded, often, state and local governments?
Well, it's a $500 million grant program in my legislation that would enable our state, local, and tribal governments to gain access to the types of sort of infrastructure protection that they require in order to really mitigate damages or prevent them from the outset, to build out a workforce dedicated to monitoring their networks and working in partnership with CISA to identify threats. Right now, the bill has been incorporated into the Build Back Better Act. And unfortunately, there's some give and take here with respect to the amount of funding that may be made available. But we really believe we've got to start somewhere. So many of our local entities, our government agencies have already been hit. I mean, we've all witnessed right there in DC, the Washington, DC Police Department, being infiltrated, being threatened, and having vital information released. That is very dangerous in terms of public safety. And you can see how that would even take on a whole nother level of danger, if you will, as we move throughout national security. So we want to start on the ground floor with our state, local, municipal governments, giving them the incentive. And with our bill, we are also incentivizing states to partner with us and take this on as an area of expertise within their own governments so that they can be on the front lines with us. And we would partner with funding these initiatives in our states, our municipalities, our tribal governments, so that it will be enduring, which is important because we're in this for the long haul. After, I think, what we've experienced with COVID-19, the rapid adoption of the virtual world as we know it, it's important that we see this as a real discipline and that we encourage at every level of governance in the private sector and, quite frankly, among individuals, a conscientious hygiene for all things cyber. At the end of the day, we all become a weakest link for our adversaries to infiltrate our networks. And that can mean, catastrophic danger to life as we know it.
Absolutely. And, as I mentioned, it has been an incredibly difficult year in cybersecurity, but it's also shed a lot of attention, a lot of the spotlight on this issue. Can you speak to how some of these major incidents, such as the attack on, Colonial Pipeline, JBS, the SolarWinds hack, has helped fuel interest and bipartisanship in cybersecurity, and also how that this might fuel your work in the subcommittee?
Well, let me say that we have seen a real sea change in sort of the interest and the actions to protect ourselves. The last administration had somewhat of a disjointed approach to cybersecurity. And so we're really making up for lost time. And I think that the Biden administration has really demonstrated how very critical this is to, again, I hate to be hyperbolic, but life as we know it. And they've begun to put the appropriate personnel in place. We now have a director in the White House specific to cybersecurity. We're beefing up the ability for CISA to expand its bandwidth to help us and to be able to gather the tools, expertise, and ability to work with the private sector, to work with the federal enterprise, to harden our ability to protect ourselves against these cyber attacks. So I think that there's been a shift, a very important and necessary shift to being extremely conscientious and serious about building out a practice, if you will, of cybersecurity within the federal enterprise, which will help us both at the state, the local, the tribal level to really be on the front guard, on the front lines and guarding against malicious actors.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Congresswoman, for your time with us today, and also your work in cybersecurity. Wish you the best of luck, and the best of luck getting through the rest of this incredibly busy month.
Well, thank you for having me, Maggie, and to everyone out there. Cyber hygiene is so very important. If you are online, you should be looking to employ two-factor authentication so that we know it's you when you're using, the various hard software on the net. You can Google it. You can find out much more about how to protect yourself, or you can reach out to CISA and they will be a resource to you. This is cybersecurity education and Cyber Awareness Month. We all need to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem.
Absolutely. Thank you, Congresswoman.
Thank you, Maggie.